Welcome to episode 26 of Escape the Rat Race Radio. I'm your host, Christian Rodwell, and this is your ticket to escape the 9 to 5.
We have a duty to create successful ventures, to continue to support not only those who are close to us, but those who need us. And we can help that right now through our commitment and our involvement with B1G1. I can't think of a more important time to be alive. I really can't. And I mean alive in the strictest sense of that word. Really enjoying and living every moment and really understanding every moment is an opportunity for us to connect.
Welcome to part 2 of my interview with the chairman and co-founder of B1G1, Mr. Paul Dunn. Now, if you haven't yet listened to part 1 of the interview from last week, then I really do encourage you to go back and check that out because there were so many great things discussed and it will really roll into the rest of our conversation today, where Paul carries on from where he left off. And we discussed how B1G1 has now been at the centre of over 100 million giving impacts worldwide. And Paul shares what keeps him energised and allows him to continue his relentless speaking commitments across the world, sharing his positive message with all that will listen. During our chat, Paul talks about the metaphor of the rat spinning round on the wheel and how for so many people that is a reflection of their life, with simply no purpose and no real meaning to the work that they wake up every morning to do. So let's dive straight back into part 2 of my interview with 4 times TEDx speaker and one of the world's most in-demand personal and professional business mentors, Mr. Paul Dunn.
Think about it this way. Typically when we think about charity, which by the way, the studies show that sadly, nearly 7 out of 10 people feel bad about that word because they've had a bad experience, which is a sad commentary, but it's true. But let's just think about it for the minute. And we tend to think it's all about donate, donate, donate. I don't think it's about that at all. I think that what we have a responsibility to do right now is to create a business that really matters, something that really matters. And I love what one of my fellow TED speakers, Brené Brown, says about that. It's really powerful. She says this: connection is why we're here. It's what gives meaning and purpose to our lives. So just think about that for a minute. So we've got connection is why we're here. It's what gives meaning and purpose to our lives. So think of it this way. When there's no connection, there's no meaning and purpose. Or think about it another way. When there's no meaning and purpose, there's no connection, right? You get it. It's like one of those sort of virtuous circle kind of things. And so what B1G1 really does is it helps you matter. That's what it actually does. And it actually helps you create that and create those amazing connections every second, every day, and in every way. So, that's why I said, Christian, earlier on, it's important to get away from the traditional view of, supporting, quote unquote, supporting a charity somewhere. This is very, very different than that. And what I see it doing just today, actually, someone said, this guy's a builder who happens to build schools for kids with disabilities. His name is Nigel. And Nigel said to me, Nigel's a typical sort of Aussie bloke, and a typical Aussie builder bloke. And Nigel said, you know what, Paul? He said in this lovely Aussie accent, he said, B1G1 has transformed my business. It really has. And then he went on and he said, and it's not just me. He said, this apprentice we've got? He said, we have this apprentice. The guy's got tattoos up his arm and everything, and he's got, and he said, we've now got this guy. We hired this guy, and he said, we've got him on. And what he's doing is he's running the entire B1G1 thing. He literally said, it's changed that guy's life. Talking about kids, just as an interesting comment on that, we, as I think we do what are called study tours every year, where we go and we really get, in the guts, to put it very crudely, to get at the core of various projects around the world. And I remember on one of them a couple of years ago, there was this accountant, his name is Jeremy, and he brought his daughter and his son with him. The daughter's name is Jessica. And Jessica, who was 14 at the time, had this profound experience. She's not someone who sort of goes, oh, wow, look at that. She's a very quiet young lady. And anyway, long story short, what happened is, as a result of this, they said, Paul, could you come to our school and talk with our class? And I said, sure. And thinking, well, the class would be, maximum 50 people. By the time I got there, they'd actually invited the entire school. So there's 550 kids in this auditorium. And I say to Jessica, who's going to introduce me, she says, I say to her, so Jessica, if there was one idea that you'd love me to leave your fellow students with, what would that be? And she said, oh, Paul said, that's actually quite easy. Now, I want everybody, to really listen into this, because it's really, really profound. It's that whole thing that out of the mouths of babes comes wisdom. So have a listen to this. What she said was this: Paul, the thing that I'd like you to leave with them is that we often think that when we give, it's the recipients that are the beneficiary. The reality is that we're the beneficiaries by allowing us to do that. Oh, wow.
That is really lovely, Paul. Thank you. And it reminds me of a quote by the great Zig Ziglar, that you can have everything you want in this world by helping enough people get everything that they want. And I've also heard you mention in your previous podcast interview a while back with Glenn Carlson that you had been, dare I say, dragged along to a Jim Rohn seminar back in 1981. Am I correct?
It was actually the 6th of December, 1980, to be absolutely correct, is when it was, yes.
Now, I often refer to Jim as being my first mentor, because it was a friend of mine that first put a Jim Rohn CD into his car player when I returned back to the UK after living out in Sydney, Australia back in 2004. And that was my first real taste of personal development. And from that, of course, triggered listening to Tony Robbins, Brian Tracy, and just so many other great speakers and authors, many of whom passed through the legendary company Nightingale Conant, whose former CEO, Gary Chappell, was actually a previous guest on Escape the Rat Race Radio back on episode 21. So if any of our listeners now haven't checked that one out, please go and do so. So I know that we've got so many massive Jim Rohn fans within Escape the Rat Race community, Paul. So I'd really love to hear from you what your experience of Jim Rohn was for that first time back in 1980.
Oh, well, yeah, thank you for the question. I literally was dragged along. Because, at the time I was running one of Australia's first computer companies, actually. And, we had grown that. We were turning over $23 million. And I had 150 people. And this lady calls and says, I want you to come to this seminar. And she literally dragged me to this seminar. What would I want to go to a seminar for, kind of thing, There were about 400 people. There was Rohn. And if you've ever seen, or if you ever saw, because of course, sadly, he left us, 3.5 years ago now. If you ever saw Rohn, he was fascinating. Christian, you've seen me when I present, and I can't sit still, right? I don't sit, but I'm sort of all over the place, hopefully full of energy. But I remember he just grabbed hold of the lectern and he stayed in one spot. I'm sitting there listening to him and I'm going, wow, I must say I don't much like the fact that he's not up and down the stage, keeping us all entertained. But boy, oh boy, do his words actually hit us like you wouldn't believe. When I saw him, for me, it was very interesting. And I guess we all have these moments in our life. Is it Roger? I think it is Roger Hamilton who says, life is just a whole series of critical moments. And this was certainly one for me, because I remember looking at it, and for me, it was like a time tunnel, and instead of it being him at the end of the tunnel, it was me. It was just me. And all of a sudden I saw, oh my goodness, that's me. That's actually what I want to do. And I can do that. Rohn, as you know, was really big on keeping a journal, and you had to write so I went right out and I got a journal and I wrote down, I'm going to train 500 people this year. And I, called up my colleagues in the computer company and said, hey, I'm not going to be here. They said, you might want to rethink that. I said, no, but I'll give you 6 months. And so yeah, that was, Rohn was the the start of my journey. And I think, interesting enough, just reflecting on that experience now, and thank you for bringing it back to me. Someone today, actually yesterday, I beg your pardon, yesterday someone was saying, Paul, it's interesting. I mean, you got a few years on you here. And so how do you keep that, so energized and so sort of enthusiastic and all of that? And I reflected on it, and I love your Zig Ziglar quote, by the way. And my answer to it is that when I'm speaking with audiences, you get it from the audiences. And I want to tell you what happens when I talk to audiences in a minute. I think for me, and hopefully for everyone listening, it's really a matter of just being curious. We do live in the most exciting times ever. And there's so much amazing stuff going on that, for me, I just can't help thinking, well, how is that? Wow, look at that. Isn't that exciting? Wow, look at this. So, for me, I'm downloading every beta in the book, because I just want to see, what's going on technologically and so on. So I can't think of a more important time to be alive. I really can't. And I mean alive in the strictest sense of that word. Really enjoying and living every moment and really understanding every moment is an opportunity for us to connect with ourselves and to connect with, whoever it is we're going to connect with, or to connect with some interesting movement or whatever it might be. I'm very fortunate that, I'm in front of audiences pretty much every day. What a privilege that is to be able, it's like now, right? What a privilege it is that through the magic of technology, you and I can be chatting here. People all around the world can tune into it, and hopefully it's valuable for them to do that. It's amazing when you think about it, right? It's like, wow, how did that happen, right? And aren't I just the most fortunate guy to experience that moment, and to know that people are listening, and in some way, hopefully, it's going to inspire them to do things. And so tomorrow morning, when I get up, and I'll do a couple of things, obviously, before the day starts, but then I'll be in front of that audience and I'll get introduced. And hopefully what I'm about to tell you makes some sense. Until about 4 months ago, when I'm being introduced, I will stand at the back of the room, or halfway down, depending on the size of the room, of course. And I'll just get this little quiet space, just behind a pillar or something like that. And what I used to do is I used to say this. I used to say 2 words to myself. See, someone once said to me, Paul, do you ever get butterflies when you speak? And I said, well, of course I do. And they said, that's good. You've got to have the butterflies, they said. And they said, but the trick is to get the butterflies flying in formation. That's the trick. So here's how I get the butterflies flying in formation. So I'm at the back of the room, as I was saying, behind a pillar, and I just say to myself, well, what I used to do was say to myself these 2 words, and I would say them like 6 or 7 times. And what I would say is, for them, for them, for them, for them, for them. In other words, trying to get my head around the fact that this isn't about me. This is about the audience, right? That's why I'm there, right? And then it's interesting. I saw this film. You may have seen it. It came out of Denmark, I think, which was all about diversity. And I remember one Saturday, I'm looking at this film. Like, oh my God! For 32 years, I've been standing on a platform, and I've been saying, for them, for them, for them. And if you think about it, for me, that was really magical. But if you think about it, by saying those words, what I'm actually doing is I'm sort of putting myself above you. You know what I'm saying? It's like, I'm for them, right? And so that one day after I watched that 3-minute movie, I went, oh my God, all these years I've been saying that. And so the question is, well, what did you change it to? Well, I can tell you that tomorrow morning I will be saying, for us, for us, for us, for us. And actually, just saying that brought a lump into my throat, because it just brought back, why we're here, and the fact that we really all are one, and that we we have a responsibility to our fellow man, if you will, fellow woman, to be that person who is inspiring them, who's giving, not taking, and so on, and even giving to people that we never will meet, and just because we're lucky, we really are lucky, and we were born, in wherever it was we were born, and now that doesn't mean that all of us should be, stepping out necessarily to be entrepreneurs, because obviously, there are some great corporations out there, which, I'm impressed, for example, with people like Paul Polman, who, from Unilever. Do you know Unilever had 1 million people apply for jobs last year? And the reason they did that, or the reason that happened, is because Paul Polman, who runs Unilever, really gets this whole meaning and purpose thing that you and I have been speaking about. It's really, really interesting. So I don't want to say necessarily that we should escape the rat race kind of thing, but what we should do is and I think that's a metaphor in a sense for the rat race. Whenever I think of rat race, I think of that, the rat on the wheel, you know what I mean, just going round and round and round on the wheel. And so some people are going round and round on the wheel, and there's no purpose, there's no meaning. And so I don't necessarily want to suggest that you have to go out on your own and do all of those sorts of things. What I think the big message is that we need to find our meaning and purpose. And we need to understand as well that when we find that meaning and purpose, it is literally for now. If you think of someone who a lot of people would really be impressed by, let's say Sir Richard Branson. And isn't it sad what's been happening across those Caribbean islands, with all of that stuff that's going on with right now. But in any event, oh, by the way, everybody listening to this should go and have a look at Sir Richard's latest film. It's called Never Look Down, and I think you can get it on Netflix. And it's a classic case of the entrepreneurial journey and facing risks and so on. It really is an amazing film. But anyway, let me talk about Richard very quickly. If you go back 9 years ago and you said to him, okay, so Richard, I'm not sure if he was your sirship then, but anyway, okay, Mr. Branson, what's your purpose in life? And at that point, Branson would have said to you, well, it's to disrupt industries that need disrupting, and it's to have fun doing it. That's what he would have said. And then there was a moment for him. There was a moment, and maybe this podcast is that moment for you, when he realized there was something else. There was something else, and there was this obligation to literally obligation, not a choice, but the obligation to leave the legacy. And so now you go and talk to Sir Richard and you say, okay, Sir Richard, so what's your purpose? Tell me why you get up every morning. And what he would say now is this. He would say, I get up every morning to disrupt industries that need disrupting, and to have fun doing it, and to make a massive difference to our world as a result of doing it. And that to me is just this beautiful illustration of how times can, of how whys can change. And perhaps as a final thought, you mentioned Dan Priestley earlier on, yeah? Actually, I want to talk about Dan's dad. Dan's dad, it's amazing. When I met Dan, he told me that when he was 14, his dad, every time his dad went on a trip, he would put my tapes in his car, my cassette tapes. You remember that cassette tapes? And Dan would listen to them on the journey. And so his dad made him do that. Anyway, someone sent me a note just a couple of days ago about a conversation that they had that I think is really important in terms of escaping, the quote unquote rat race. Is it okay if I tell you the story? Just real quick. It's a very quick story. So Andrew, that is to say Andrew Priestley, Dan Priestley's dad, he asked this question. He was in this room and he asked everybody to put up their hands if they felt that, now this requires you, by the way, to really listen, have a listen to it. If they felt that being healthy was a choice they made, right? So put up your hand if you feel that being healthy is a choice that you make. And most everybody in the room put their hand up. And then before Andrew asked the next question, he said, if you raised your hand to the first question, you cannot raise it again. So then he asked the second question, which is, raise your hands. Remember, you couldn't raise your hand if you felt that it was a choice. If they felt that being healthy was their duty. Did we have children, partners, relatives, a team, and clients who depended on our health and well-being for their own? And so the analogy here is that our businesses are the same as our health. The way we show up is exactly the same as our health. So we have people, we have family, we have teams, we have clients who rely on our businesses to, if you will, provide for them. So is it a choice or is it a duty to ensure that our entrepreneurial enterprises are successful? And if we extend that out, by the way, to the impacts that we make globally with, for example, B1G1, we now have people that we've never met in countries that we've never been to, relying on the success of our businesses to provide the basics they need to survive. And so in a sense, we have a duty to create successful ventures, to continue to support not only those who are close to us, but those who need us. And we can help that right now through our commitment and our involvement with B1G1. And, I just mentioned Branson just quickly, and I think all of us as entrepreneurs need to understand that something very interesting happened on the 23rd of September in 2015. And that was the day that Branson was at the United Nations in Geneva, together, funnily enough, with Paul Polman from Unilever. And Branson said, it's not every day that I'm here at the United Nations. And he said, the reason that I'm here is because today, 23rd of September, marks a very significant day in our world. Because today I'm here to announce or to launch the Sustainable Development Goals. And some of you would have seen these Sustainable Development Goals, these 17 things that we have a commitment to change, to act on by 2030. And Branson said, the reason I'm here is that none of these goals, these 17 Sustainable Development Goals, require governments to sign off on them. Because at long last, if ever, by the way, you were thinking about delaying your entrepreneurial journey, hopefully this makes you go, no, now's the time. Because Branson said, for the very first time, the United Nations, the world body, has acknowledged that it's not governments that change our world. It's entrepreneurs who get out there, who create employment, who create all of those sorts of things, and who actually, through all of those things that they do, make the real positive difference to our world. Hopefully, as a result of all of the things that we've shared here, you go, wow, I've really got an obligation to go do that thing that I want to do, to get that meaning and purpose back in my life, and to really focus on it, to accept that it could change, but at least to, start the journey now.
It's been such a great pleasure to learn from you and be part of the sharing of such inspiring stories. I always finish by asking my guests to share what their final piece of advice is for those people who are listening right now, maybe stuck in a traffic jam, or they're on the bus or the train, on that daily commute back and forth from the office, and they just know there's a whole lot more that they could be contributing to the world, but something's holding them back. Maybe it's fear of the unknown, maybe they're risk averse, or just afraid of taking that leap and just saying, what if? So what would be your piece of advice, Paul, for someone who really wants to make the change, but something inside them is just holding them back?
Well, that's such an interesting question. I'm never really sure that there's one thing, but one thing that I love is, one of the people that I read every day is Seth Godin, right? And if you, by the way, are listening to this and you're not listening to Seth Godin, or at least not listening, but getting his blog, Seth Godin, GODIN.com, just go and get it. And Seth is just so eclectic. And there's one word that Seth uses, not necessarily overtly, but you'll see it as a thread. And the word is really interesting, actually. And the word is ship. Now, you might say, well, why would I say that one word? Because it is, we try and make products or services and design things, and we try and wait for that perfect thing. And we're not going to get it out until it's perfect, right? And so as a result, it never gets out. And maybe that's you. Maybe today is the day to ship, to just get it out, to let someone or a group or whatever it is, just go figure, how can you add value to them? And then to use that as a learning experience, right? So the reason Seth says to ship is because that's the only way that you get the feedback. That's the only way that we build new things, that we create new services. It's just to get it out there. And maybe today's the day when it's waiting for you to get out there.
Well, that's a really great point for us to bring our conversation to a climax today, Paul. And it's been my absolute pleasure to have you as a guest on Escape the Rat Race Radio today. And I'd like to express my gratitude both to you and to your wonderful partner, Masami. And just thank you for the wonderful positive ripple effect that you put out into the world and all of the impacts that you've had on so many people.
Well, thank you. I mean, I'm sure you went through that same issue. You said, I think I should do a podcast, and then one day you did it, and then as a result, just think of the thousands of people who are benefiting, and really understand that it creates a massive ripple as well, just like B1G1 does as well. So I just want to. I mean, it's lovely for you to say thank you, but I really think that. I just feel that I've been the beneficiary of it by having the opportunity to say things that I may never have said before. And hopefully people listening to it got some ideas that they can share as well.
Thank you very much, Paul. I'm absolutely certain that they will have.
Christian, thank you. Make it a great one today too.
So I hope you enjoyed today's conversation with Paul as much as I did. Now, Paul shared some encouraging words there that even if you have been struggling on finding your purpose and meaning, that this doesn't need to be your purpose and meaning for the rest of your life. And just by appreciating what's important to you right now can be enough to make a positive shift in your life. And something I particularly love that Paul shared, which was the story of Daniel Priestley's father, and it's centered around whether our businesses are our duty or actually are they our obligation to be successful because of all the other people that rely on our business to provide for them. And of course, how this ripple effect actually now spreads far and wide across the globe through the many millions of giving impacts being facilitated by B1G1, the company that Paul is chairman of and represents with such absolute respect from all that come into contact with him. So don't forget to go and check out www.b1g1.com. Take a look at just how easy it is for you to get connected to. And if you aren't yet connected to our Escape the Rat Race private Facebook group, then head over there as well by visiting www.etrr.online/Facebook right now. Well, thank you for being part of the last 30 minutes with me. Please do share the highlights for you and any suggestions you have for guests that I can reach out to on your behalf and ask them the questions which might just be the trigger for you to take that bold step and take action to a life with more freedom, playing the game life on your terms. You can drop me an email by chris@etrr.online. Until then, have a wonderful week. See ya.